Hey, I'm Liam Higgins, and I'm a cinematographer. Today we're on set with Rodeo Production with director Daniel Aaronworth. We're shooting a spot for Purolator. The big sort of approach that we wanted to take for this project was really about creating these sort of seamless looks between all three sets, whether it was high key for our ball drop set and for our Heart in the Box going with like a little bit more of a moodier look and a little bit more practical. So kind of creating these different worlds that feel very Wes Anderson-like, very symmetrical, very bright, very color blocked, and kind of just building off the ambiance of that sort of commercial feel, which is like very bright, very stylized, and very colorful.
Don't worry, we're sensitive to time sensitivity.
So we decided to go with the RE Alexa Mini and the RE Master Prime specifically on this job. I really like the clean look that the Master Primes have. I find that when it comes to commercial work, Master Primes, Ultra Primes, like those different set of lenses have a really great way of keeping the image very nice and very sharp. And I find when you're doing higher key commercial work, it kind of gives you a little bit more of that clean sort of feel, so that when you go into the grade, there's a lot more to play with and there's a lot more cleanliness across the board of the image, where, you know, shooting on, say, something like a little bit more distinguished would kind of give you a bit more of a particular look. I find that the Master Primes are very adaptable when creating a clean look, more or less. We decided to go with the jib for our overhead shots, mainly because we wanted the flexibility to reframe while not getting in the way of our talent. And it definitely allowed us to kind of find moments within those frames that we felt if we needed to come out a bit, we would have the flexibility to do so. And with the dolly specifically, we found that we wanted a nice clean motion inward, but obviously one that was subtle enough where we wouldn't see too much movement when we were pushing in. But then at the same time, we wanted to be able to have the flexibility to pan away or whip pan if we needed to get to our next areas for like that more stylized effect, whether it be through comedy or the high key kind of aspect of that.
We'll do whatever we can to keep the ball in play.
I think the biggest thing for me when it comes to lighting sets like this is that I sort of already have an idea in my brain going into it. And then where the magic really happens for these things is the collaboration between departments. So with my gaffer and the production designer, because there's certain things like practicals and certain small accents that you maybe don't think of that your team does, that really helps elevate the look overall. So for the first setup, we really wanted to create more of a soft overhead fluorescent look, one that kind of like feathered off to the entire set. So we used the 2K space lights. The 2K space lights allowed us to kind of set the general ambient tone of the entire room. And then from there, it kind of allowed us to fill in pockets where we would accent certain parts of the set, whether it be our subject or hands or things like that with other lights. And then with the key light that we have behind us here, we went with a sky pan with half diffusion, light tools, and then we put a light grid 6x in front of it. And the whole point of that was to be able to get a nice soft ambient push from the front to be a little bit more key to fill out the eyes. But then also at the same time, softening it up far enough so that we could have a fall off, so it doesn't actually have too much shadows and just helps fill in the raccoon eyes. For sets like these, we have overhead lights going right now, which kind of helps pop a little bit more accent on our main subject. And then we shot a sky panel up against our sight to create an even sort of orange look. And then we set a silk up so it almost looks like a very subtle backlight coming through our set on this one, creating everything as soft as possible just to really have the most flattering light across the board.
Relax. Your heart's in good hands from door to door.
Prior to being a cinematographer, I worked mainly in the lighting department. Getting to cut my teeth in the lighting department definitely taught me a lot about how I was going to shape light and how I was going to choose certain sources and how they ended up throwing, like whether it be in a space or in a and like a Lico being used as a hair light, things like that. Like, so those tools that I learned from being a gaffer and a key grip definitely paved the way for me as a cinematographer, specifically crafting my style, because I had the opportunity to work with a lot of really different great gaffers coming up, and I think they were really vocal in helping me shape the way that I looked at images. Obviously, in the instance of a commercial like this, we do have to maintain somewhat of a relatively high key look, but even in those kind of moments, you can still place small bits of yourself in the image. For me, it's like I really try to integrate color. Like that's a really, really big part of what I do, but then also at the same time, I do try to focus more on just kind of displaying tableaus, particularly in a lot of my narrative work. But in projects like this, even where there's a moment where we can tell the story in a single frame, whether that be through a slow push in or a slow pull out, I tend to lean into more darker images, stuff that's a little bit more moody, stuff that would work well in dramas or thrillers. And from that, I've found that the tonality of those images specifically speak mostly to the kind of language of how I see the worlds in which I create in film specifically, because I think, you know, there is moments where you kind of look at a space and it's not always that bright, for instance, or it's not always have that much shape. Sometimes it's very low key, sometimes it's about that. From the perspective of lighting, and the way that I'm looking at something is I'm always trying to find a best frame to tell the story, but I also think at the same token, I'm trying to light a space so it feels realistic. So it's not like taking away from the actual art of the project or the art of the story. I think that's kind of like the most important thing to me. Thanks for joining me today on the set of Purolator with Rodeo Production and Daniel Aaronworth.